Yo, it's Guido coming at you with a Tactics Talk map room, and this time we're going to talk about Ensk. Ensk, one of the older maps, actually. This is one of the first maps I actually remember even ever playing in the game. It's been around for quite a long time. Relatively small map. Got basically a field over here in the east, the train tracks, some buildings on the east side, and the west side is the city part in there, but a fairly constrained map. Difficult to really get around in like scouts and remain unspotted. But it does provide a lot of heavy brawling, both in the city and in some of these buildings over here, with a bit of a field, a kind of a constrained field for scouts to do their thing. So we're going to go ahead and do the standard stuff. Talk about deployment routes, typical class positions, where you can get early shots. There are some places on this map to do so. The general meta, how it plays, critical terrain, high risk, high reward spots, non-standard win options on this, battle flow, crossfire, flex opportunities, and then the late game considerations. Hey, I'm winning. Hey, I'm losing. What should I do? So we will start off with deployment routes. First things first, though, realize that this actually has two modes. There is a standard mode and an encounter mode. There's no assault or defense on this particular one. The encounter has the, what is it? Cap. Yes, that thing right here in this central courtyard. The thing about this map is it essentially plays the same with both modes. There's a slight difference that we'll discuss on the encounter on really where you should go initially. And we'll talk about that in just a moment, but they do play very similarly. All right, so with the green side, deployment routes, where are you going to go? You start here basically near cap, and to be quite honest, I think it's actually shifted out here into the field on encounter, which is why it changes a little bit. So you spawn over on the west side or the middle if you are on standard, and you're over here in the field if you are on encounter, and that's why it's changed just a little bit. But I'll give you general deployment routes here. You can come out of cap. Oops, I don't want the dash line. We want a normal line. Come out of cap, come through here. You do have to kind of E&E your way through the building, especially if you spawn back in this area right here. You can come down this road and you can post up to here. There's a lot of places in amongst these buildings. You can come around and post up here. You can come to this edge and post up here. There are options to push in and actually come and side scrape here as well. You can, however you do it, from this direction or from this direction, head over and come down this road, and you can post up here on this corner. Potential side scraping. There are some places back in here, some ramps, and some hidey holes you can get in to look down this road here on the west side. So those are all possibilities right there. You can break off and come in and look in. There's some windows here. Now, I'm trying to remember whether it's, I don't remember if it's encounter or standard. One of them has a slightly different map, and those windows are broken or are filled in, and I believe it's encounter. And the reason is that it would be too easy to hang out back here and shred people who try to get on the cap. So I believe this is blocked. These windows are blocked on encounter. You can also come down here and side scrape on this edge, looking down here to the south. And then there's lots of options for coming back the other way. Some people will come down the middle. You can actually post up here. You can get more aggressive and come to here, although that does afford side shots into you coming from this direction. You can come down here or potentially here for early shots. We'll talk that in a minute. A bit of a dangerous move. And then you've got all the options. You'll see people come back here and hang out by this building and this building right here. You'll see them peel off and come up to this building right here, which then has some hold down opportunities back behind it. You'll see them come down here and post up here. And to be honest, there are just so many little places. You can come to this edge, although that's a bit dangerous because it can be seen from over here. Nobody really goes into these buildings, at least initially, just in because most of these are destructible. They'll get knocked. So is this one, as a matter of fact. You can see all the buildings with the white. Those are destructible buildings. The black ones can't be destroyed. You can, we're going to do, we'll talk about high risk, high reward, because you can actually come forward a little bit. We'll talk about that in just a bit. The artillery then is going to come back probably in this area here. There is a possibility to put artillery back here, and you can sit back here, but it is a bit dangerous because if they get any kind of closer, you're really out in the open right there. It's recommended to be back over here or over here. All right. red deployments. It's basically a mirror image, it really is. Coming up the middle, posting up here, potentially a little further into this spot. Red has a bit of an easier time getting to here, so they actually have one more option coming, leapfrogging up through these buildings, but that is swept by fire from over here, where the green is looking at you, but it is a possibility. If you have pushed them back, then moving up through these buildings, this area right here is a bit of an option. You can do the same thing here with scouts for getting early shots and lights. And we'll go ahead and come this way. You can come through this, post up here. You can break off, post up here. We're going to mix the streams just a little bit, because if you are an encounter and you spawn a little bit further over this way, there's an option to come up and post up right here as well. You can do that with the standard as well. There's a bit of a wall that needs to be broken down, but you have a pretty good view up into this area up above right here. There is also an option to head back to the back. Very interesting on this map, though it's kind of a mirror image-ish. There's no real position like this one for the red guys. Scouts can't come out here, and this has some undulating terrain, so I'm just really going to kind of put it out in the middle right there. There are also some bushes that you can get to, but they're very small and difficult to use, and because the ranges are so close, they're hard to get into without being spotted, especially by guys down here if they get there quickly. But there are multiple spots in this part of the map for the red team to use, but they're not great. Not nearly as good as a building, albeit a destructible one, that you can gotta hide behind with some bushes. So this one's a bit of an interesting one for me in that regard. All right, coming from this way, coming across here, you do need to watch this crossing. I kind of recommend actually staying back behind as opposed to coming down here and crossing, because if somebody can get to the one that has the window very quickly and you're slow, you might get shot in the side. You have a little bit more cover coming this way. So there's multiple ways to go through these buildings like a so. And all of them come together, and now you're going to come in here. So it's very interesting how these guys have kind of different positions, and it's a little bit harder on this side. You can come here and post up here, and you do have some shots kind of into some of these spots. There are some very thin slivers through these, which means if you want to do it and come to the right side of that opening, then you're going to be side scraping it, and you're going to actually be able to see there. The other possibility is to come in and side scrape on this. There is a post back here. There's some bushes and things. You can side scrape off of this shot, off of this building, and you can sort of do it on this side as well with less opportunity for shots, because you're really expecting one of the green guys to just show themselves in these alleys. And we'll get to some of the high risk, high reward stuff a little bit later, because there's an opportunity to move into this middle road right here early on. The other possibility is to side scrape here, come to side scrape right there, and then of course back into these buildings over here, post up for shots down there, kind of the corollary to these buildings here. This one's a little more open though, a little bit more open down here, so maybe not quite as good. This area is semi-useful. It's kind of a later game option. There is a possibility to come in here and kind of side scrape here and look down this road here. You can kind of do the same thing over here, or potentially from this spot right here, but they're not very useful till later. And usually when the green team starts to win and push through these buildings, you've fallen back maybe to this place as a defensive position, and you're trying to keep them from coming in there and taking out. That's more of a last ditch. It's not a really great initial position, except for maybe this spot if there's some action going on this middle road right here. I'm just going to update a little bit the green team, because it is possible to come in here and side scrape on this spot, or to even come up a little bit more and kind of do it here, much like these guys do. But I find being a little bit further back, at least initially for the green guys, is a better idea in here, and it's a little bit better for the red guys the way this thing is built here to be able to move up forward. And that's pretty much it. So let's talk about typical class positions. We'll start with the green guys. Obviously heavies, all these spots for heavies are good spots. This spot here, the windows if they happen to be there, that spot, all good heavy spots. You can use them here as well, and potentially there, but mostly up front I think is your best bet. I'm going to put heavies over here, and like I said, we're going to split the streams a little bit. I am going to talk about now a bit of the encounter stuff, because on encounter on this map, you really want to fight out here. And on standard, you probably want to fight in here. The reason you want to fight out here on encounter is because you're spawned out here. And if you get a really good push quickly into the field, you can really dominate from either direction whatever enemy gets put into the field. Because usually one team or the other doesn't put a lot in there, and they're going to get rolled up. It's not as big a player in the standard mode because the city becomes more of the brawl in the standard mode. So we'll put heavies over here. That is a possibility. As far as medium tanks go, they're out in the field. You've got some back here. You can put them up here, this spot as well. If you're going to get aggressive, potentially there's some pipes right here you can hide behind. There's a spot here, which is difficult to use because it is swept by fire. If these guys own this slightly higher terrain over here in the east, very difficult to live right there. And if they get up further north, you're not going to last very long at all because they're going to have shots right into your side. So this is kind of the high risk, high reward spot I was talking about. Mediums here as well. They're more mobile, so they're actually a little bit better for working in the trains. Potentially here and here for shots, for those early shots to see you guys come across right there. And of course, you could put a medium back there as well. And we'll just kind of throw some mediums in here. If you've got a brawling heavium, then in here with the rest of the heavies is a good spot as well, potentially here also. So really mediums nearly anywhere on the map, depending on the medium you've got. Obviously the heavier ones up front, the lighter ones maybe working around the middle area or potentially out in the field with the ability to move around. And if you like to help out the heavy tanks with your medium, then yeah, right here in the middle is a great spot. And now we'll go with scouts. It's nice to get a scout in one of these spots and come down this way just a little bit. Watch your spotting and view range circles. Don't commit so far down here you can't get away, because these trains will stop you from getting away. You're going to have to back out or turn all the way around and run away. But if you've got good vision, you can come, and I've got them pretty deep. It's more like a little bit further up to the north here. You might be able to catch guys crossing down here and get somebody along this area a shot in their side. So that's where some of the early shots are going to be. So we'll put lights right there. I don't really recommend lights down in the city. Not initially. Potentially maybe there, and if you're super aggressive, maybe right there. But you're talking out here, potentially back here, moving around in this area to get lights, potentially here to start spotting depending on what's going on out here in the field. Those are all good light positions. TDs, you're going to find TDs sitting back here. If you're mobile, potentially there. Sometimes glass cannons can actually have a good day there. Problem is it's exposed to arty because there's no real cover. And once they knock down the building, there's a lot of shots at you. So be careful with that spot there. You could also put a TD there for shots out into that area. Potentially here and here for shots straight down as they're crossing, depending on the kind of TD. And of course, you're going to find TDs sitting in this camping spot back over here. Another possibility of putting one right there for shooting down here. So I think what you're getting from this, if you kind of see what I'm doing here, this map has a lot of positions for the tanks on basically everywhere. The only thing I really wouldn't do is bring a light into here and clearly, obviously, just drive a tank down, or drive an SPG down the road, right? So otherwise, you can more or less go anywhere and go with the flow of the battle. I have seen assault TDs do good work in this area as well with the heavies. So no problem potentially looking through this window as well. And we'll even throw one there because there's been plenty of opportunities for TDs to kind of take shots down this as well that I've seen. For the SPGs here in this general area, potentially all the way over here, you do have to be careful with some of these buildings. Trying to get a good angle on this map is really difficult with SPGs. If you're up here, you have all kinds of great shots down here in the southeast, but you have really poor shots into the buildings. If you're up in this corner in the northeast, you have decent shots down into the southwest. You do have shots, easy shots. Obviously, it's a nice straight shot down here into the southeast, but it's easy to get trapped. If you see that you're really light in the field, don't drive your SPG all the way over here just because it has better shots. You want to be over here because you're going to get rolled up really quickly. If you go real light in the city, or sorry, in the field, especially on encounter, if your team just bails out of the field, do not put your SPG up there in the northeast because you simply will not last long. Just run back here. You're still probably in trouble because once they turn this corner, there's not a lot of cover between you and them up here, and it's a bit higher ground. They're going to have slightly down shots on you. You're kind of screwed, which is why you don't want to lose the field, especially on encounter on this map. All right, let's talk about the red team. Heavies. Heavies, heavy, heavy. Potential heavies in that area, you could send them into this area as well. Heavies can go here, and these are all good spots for heavies. This is a bit passive for me back here, but definitely up in this forward area for heavies. For the mediums, obviously you can support with your heavier mediums. You can support your heavies there, potentially here as well. This is good spots for mediums right along here. Good spot for mediums into this area, potentially moving up to, now I don't think I would take a medium up here because they're going to get shredded pretty good, but that's a good spot to at least post up right there and kind of take a look and see what's going on in the scrum, because you're going to want your light tanks working up in this area right here. Light tanks potentially here for the spotting. We'll go back to the mediums. I forgot to put them. Mediums here, again, trying to get shots down this way. These train track positions I'm showing you, and there's actually one right there as well. There's another lane. Are kind of look and see spots as I figure out how to do this. All right, there we go. Are kind of look and see spots. You don't want to just post up there and sit there. They're looking for early shots as guys cross and then move on. Either head over to the field or go back over to the city if nothing's doing. So that should be all the mediums. There you go. And the light tanks, I hit a couple over there, potentially along. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. Potentially along here for spotting. I already touched up a couple light tanks right there for spotting as well. And then for TDs, back here are some okay TD spots, but you're really relying on the green team getting further south than you really want them to. You could put a TD there for the assault, potentially into here, depending on what kind of TD it is as well. Obviously here, looking down this road is a good spot. And then just like in the north, backing up these guys with the spots, putting TD shots down these rows right here, and potentially right there with one of the more armored TDs, and this little side scrape area here as well with kind of your assault TDs. And just like these guys, if you can back up all these heavies and mediums with a couple good assault TDs in here, you can really do some good work as you start to push in. SPGs for the red side. I don't really like this spot. I've seen them go down there. Over here is a little bit better. The problem with this is this big soccer pitch right here. This is just so open. If the green team turns this corner, they're just going to see you down there really quickly. So SPGs are difficult to use on this map for lots of reasons, and they're not super survivable. You can initially, and I'm going to show you with the green guys as well, initially put your SPG right about there for really good shots in this area on the east side of the map. Just pay really close attention to how close the either red or green, depending on which one you are getting to you, because it's easy to be spotted. But this does afford some of the best shots on the east side, just kind of hanging out right about here. But again, careful, because the line of sights to see you are pretty dang easy. All right, those are the typical class positions. Let's go ahead and look at the early shots. Okay, we'll just cover the middle one first, and I've already talked about it, but there are early shots down this row, and down this row, provided you can spot them coming across. They're going to be a bit fleeting, and you're going to have to pick a lane. So depending on which way you think they're crossing, right to left or left to right, make sure you're paying attention as they get lit, because they're going to cross that little opening pretty quickly, and it's going to be a bit of a fleeting shot. But if you do have someone spotting there, you might be able to sit back here a little ways and get some free shots on guys as they cross. Other early shots for, and I've got the colors wrong, but whatever, we'll just use green for this. Other early shots are potentially getting up into this area and having shots into here and back into there, basically sweeping this whole area. But that's a high risk, high reward area right there, very definitely. You could potentially on this corner get shots on guys that are up here near the building right there off of this corner. It's harder to shoot from these two openings because you're going to be exposed if you poke around. So the early shots aren't really a play right there. You can also get early shots down this lane and potentially down this lane, again, as guys cross or if they try to post up in this area. Some early shots for those as well. Early shots from coming into the buildings from the south side, and I talked about it already. You can get some shots across to here, and if you're side scraping here, potentially into this position, and also from back here into that position. If you can get there first, get posted up, and catch their slower tanks moving through this area, you can get some shots into there as well. Possibility of shots from back here into this. And I didn't talk about this window. There's another window right there that can see into that window on standard mode anyway. So if you grab that window real quick, you might catch them moving into that one for an early shot right there. Possibility. Potential for early shots here, especially if they just drive down this. Nobody really does, but if for some reason somebody came raging down this road, you would have an early shot right there potentially as well. So that's pretty much your early shots. As far as artillery, what do you want to be looking for? Go ahead and do a squiggly line. Places you want to be watching with your artillery once you get set up is from the south, this general area right here, to find them out in the open. And then if you're fast enough to reload this general area, if a guy gets tracked or hit, or they're just plain old spotted, you may get early shots with your artillery right there as well. All right, let's look at the red side. Of course, that was the red side. We're just going to go from the green side. Using green arrows again. All right. Oh, no, we'll just use a line. Let's use a line. No, we're going to use a green dotted arrow. All right. Shots down. Same thing. Mirror image from the north side down to the south. Shooting right through all of those lanes. Potentially this lane as well. And then shooting right down here. Guys crossing all through these different openings. If you get to this window, you may get shots on guys either crossing through there or who try to jump into the window, or potentially, and this is a little bit different, you actually have shots into guys trying to do these post-ups down here as well, and potentially over here. You might from this corner have the same thing, which is a little bit different than the north side. As you can see, this is not a mirror image right here. And as you come in here, from here, you may have shots into guys in this general area. If there's a little hold down position right there that you can do. And if you were able to get into this, well, here's an interesting one. From about this position to about right there, there's shots through there. All right, from here right through into this general area. Realize I didn't show you, but there's actually return shots from the same position into you if you're moving right there. So be very careful. Those are early shots in there as well. And then we've got from this position to, if somebody for some reason comes raging down this road or somehow gets spotted in this area, you may have some early shots down there. From the field side, it's a bit tricky. You post up here, you can get shots on guys coming to that corner spot I talked about. Potentially if they're poking their nose through there, you can get shots on them, or if they try to push through to the north. There are sometimes shots into this flat area, but you really kind of have to expose yourself to do that. There is a bush there, but it's sort of hard to use, so those early shots are all possibilities right there as well. Into guys moving around through there. You can post up here. You may get shots down to the south or even through that opening and further down into there as well. You can get shots from this corner up into the field if they get lit, or potentially down into anyone's moving along this road right here, but that doesn't happen too much, really, not early on anyway. That's a bit of a later consideration. Posting up to here in the TDs and things, that takes a little while, and you can sometimes get shots into this flat area, but this is very rolling, undulating terrain right there, so it's a hard shot to get as well. The artillery is kind of the same thing. If you can catch somebody out down here, you may get an early shot, or if they're futzing around over here and they get lit, you might get an early shot, and potentially over here, paying attention to buildings get knocked down. If they get lit, you may have early shots on them as well over there, but really just crossing anywhere in this back area. Because the map is so small, you may catch guys out if one of your scouts gets down and gets a little close to them in there. That's pretty much it for the early shots. Let's look at the. Like I said, the meta is slightly different. I know I said the map plays similar, and it does, but the meta is slightly shifted. But wherever the battle is, it kind of goes the same way on both sides. So while I say on encounter, I think the field's the most important, that's not always where the fight is. And while I say on standard, it's the city that's always important, that's not always where the fight is. But I will say it is more standard on standard for it to be in the city. And it's slightly more standard on encounter to be in the field, but it really is kind of seems like the meta is starting to shift towards the city more and more, even on encounter. And the reason why the field's so important, as I said, is the spawns are kind of in the field, and that's where you are. That's the closest way to get to the bad guys. And because it's an encounter mode, and the cap circle is in this little central area right here, it's very hard to fast cap. So there's really no reason to mess around in the city. Just eat them alive up here in the field, and then go get their guys who spent all the time driving around to get into the city and mess around. And they'll be they'll be side scraping and poking around and hoping they don't get those early shots into them. And by the time they get done goofing around with that, you're probably beat the guys out in the field already. And that's the general idea on the encounter there. So that's basically the general meta. There'll be, go ahead and use orange. There'll be a fight here or here, depending on where guys pushed, and there'll be some kind of fight in these buildings right here as a general meta. There'll sometimes be a skirmish right through here, potentially as well. And those are all the places. You'll see scouts rolling around through here in general, and then there'll be some TDs kind of camping in these two spots doing the thing. And that's the general idea of what you're going to see in there. So that kind of mixed up the critical terrain with that discussion. I think it is changing a little bit, and I know that a lot of people have different ideas on this particular map. I think some people are really hard over on you fight in the city no matter what, which I get because it does give you some protection, and it's harder to fight out here. It just is. There's so many different angles, and people don't like, in general, trying to fight in harder places, but I find that to be the more important spot on encounter at least. So there you go. Critical terrain is a little bit mixed up. So high risk, high reward, we mentioned it a little bit. There is an option from the south to push into spots like this early on, which then kind of gives you control of this middle road. And you can do the same thing from the north. We'll just use the same color. But the problem is you really avail yourself to shots by guys hanging out in the back from either direction. And then your other problem that you've got is shots coming from here, and from here into your side, right? Depending on which side you're on. Say you're the red guys and you push in, but the green guys own these buildings because you didn't do anything about that, you're going to get shot in the side all day long. And that's a bit of a bummer. So that's high risk. I don't really recommend you do that initially. Get into these areas here, and then see what happens with the whole fight. See how it develops before you make a risky move in there. High risk, high reward. I think these moves with scouts trying to get shots in here are kind of high risk, high reward as well. A couple other high risk, high reward have to do with encounter mode. And it has to do with, from the south, pushing straight into this little area right here and trying to hang out in there, or even all the way up here into their face in this area right here. But that's a way high risk because usually the enemy owns this building. You're going to get a bunch of shots in the side. It's easier on encounter from the north to come screaming up here and post up against this building, or to get in behind these pipes right here. Just realize that these pipes you can be shot at from this position up here. We'll just use the arrow for the whole thing. The shots coming into you from up into that area. But it is high risk or high reward. The nice thing about from the north side getting up against this building is it really stuffs them down in here, and they have a hard time with the rest of their maneuver, and you can start to control up here because you've got shots up into them. So you push them out of the field further down south, you stuff them into those buildings down in the south here, and you can get an advantage if your team will follow up. But that's always the question, isn't it? This is a bit of a high risk, high reward move. The same thing coming from the other way to get into their side. You don't want to do that if they're aware, because if they just side scrape a couple tanks here, you have nowhere to hide. They can side scrape and just shred you before you can really get to them. But that can be another high risk, high reward kind of position. Obviously, hey diddle diddle right up the middle to get to artillery is always in play for the light tanks. All right. The only real non-standard win option I'm going to talk about here is the field. So I think the field is the critical terrain on encounter, like I noted. If you're on standard, though, there is a possibility of screaming through the field, sweeping them up, and then you come in behind them. You do the same thing from the other direction, come in behind them, and then start working into the guys that are now pinned down, hopefully, in the town. Here's the problem with that, though. If you send too many into the field and they get bogged down at all, and they're your large force, your lighter city force will probably lose fairly quickly if the enemy team has any kind of sense whatsoever. And that's the biggest, this map, that happens quite a bit. You get a significant force from either side pushing into the field, and we're flanking kind of thing, but they get pinned down or stuffed or mauled by a smaller force, and then your city guys are overwhelmed, outnumbered. It doesn't matter that you flanked. By the time you get around you have less tanks left anyway, and now they own this whole area. And they own this whole area, and you're trying to push in there with lighter tanks that are already beat up. And it doesn't go very well. Because it's very easy for this area to come back and defend caps, depending on which side they're on. Just very easy to get back to the cap and defend. There's so many angles and ways to go after that. That kind of non-standard win option, it isn't very good. All right. The reason it works to get the field on encounter, though, is that you've spawned all over here anyway, and it takes a much longer time for this city fight to develop, so you have longer time to win out here in the field and then envelop them. But this map does have a lot of envelopment kind of ideas depending on which side the fight goes and how that one goes, and then they get flanked. All right, so that's non-standard win options on that. I think I've already covered the battle flow, so we're not going to go over that. We already basically talked about how it goes. But let's talk about crossfire and flex opportunities. For the crossfire stuff, I'm not going to show you every single one of them because there is a ton, and it is something you've really got to be aware of on this map. So I'm really just going to kind of leave it at that. I'll show you a couple examples of what I'm talking about, though. And I already sort of gave one of them. It's shots like here, coming from here into people's side, coming to this corner and shooting these guys in the side. You see all these different openings. I talked about this position and this position, you know, getting shots out of here and potentially over to here. All of the various shots that are all over the place in all of these little openings. It's very easy to back out into an opening or side scrape a little too much. There's so many crossfire opportunities. If they take this area, right here, then there's all kinds of crossfire. You've got, what am I doing here? You've got shots coming in from these guys. I mean, there's so many, it's hard to go over all of them. And then never mind the field. The field is probably even worse than trying to manage all of your exposure in the city back here, because you can get shots from the field into all these nooks and crannies over here. You can get shots out of these buildings into all these field positions out here. And then I haven't even discussed all of the possibilities of crossfires. They tend to be straight down these train tracks here, but there are some openings in other places that shots can come from. You can be sitting back here and get shots right through there and all the way through to that. From all the way back here, you can do the same thing from back in these buildings. You can get shots through there as well. The map has a lot of crossfire. Okay, so it would take me probably an hour to go through all the possibilities on this map, and I haven't even touched this area or this area with all the different shots they have in all the different directions. That being said, a lot of those shots are pretty fleeting shots, and you can manage your exposure pretty well. You can kind of hide if you need to from them. You'd rather not get hit unknown from the very beginning. So be very careful on this one when you're coming around corners, because there are multiple angles you can be hit. We also didn't touch what happens when you get further back, because battle flow wise, even though we didn't talk about it, I will say this: there are good fallback positions in here for the south side and up in here for the north side. So when you win, either coming north from the south or coming south from the north, be careful as you push through these buildings, because whatever's left is going to have fallen back into the rest of this general building area back here. And if you just go driving blindly or blithely, whichever you were doing, around a corner, you may have a guy set up side scraping just waiting for you right there. So they are good defensive positions as far as battle flow goes. All right, that's that. So late game considerations. Now, we did touch on it a little bit from the green side. Late game considerations are falling back to positions like here, here, here. In this general area, let's just get a standard line here. We don't want an arrow. In here, hiding out in here, all these places, defending in here, defending in here, defending in here. So just what I talked about, all kinds of different angles and places depending on the situation. You can possibly fall back into these spots back here if you're looking for shots on your own cap, potentially. Remember, these are destructible though, so if you get a big push coming through the field, be careful about using one of these destructible buildings, because they may just knock it down real quick and take you out. But the solid buildings here are a little more usable. So if you contingency-wise, if you lose the field and you're losing back here, fall back to this general area, and you can defend here and potentially defend the cap all from this general one area right here. There's just a lot of angles to talk about as well right there, right? So if you're losing from the red side, the same thing applies. It's not quite as nice on the red side because, yes, you can defend in these spots if you start to lose and they push through, but if you've got to get back and defend your cap, you really only have this general area, and it's at one line, and you kind of have to come outside of these little, kind of have to poke yourself out and around these corners right here to get shots. And then there's these buildings which are covering up your cap that the green cap simply doesn't have. And sometimes you've got to come up to these buildings and use these buildings as cover, which unfortunately exposes you to shots on the side over right there. So the red team, on the one hand, has a slightly harder time defending their cap because they got buildings in the way. On the other hand, they have the buildings to hide behind if the green team is attempting to push in from the field. So it's a bit of a trade right there. Easier in one way and harder in the other way. But falling back into here or here is good defense positions. If you lose the field from the red side, really, you got to try to get all the way back to here because there's just no real good defensive positions here. And once they envelop you here, you're kind of screwed. Same thing applies for the green side. If you're the green side, if you lose the field, you want to choke you all the way back into this area back here that we already discussed. So lose the field, fall back into here. Lose the city, fall back into here. Same thing applies to the red side over there. If you win the field and lose the city, obviously you can fall back on the green side. You can fall back into this general area up here and use these buildings. And on the red side, unfortunately, it's not nearly as good to get into these buildings, but you can get back here or potentially in this area here looking for shots on into guys who are coming onto your cap right there as well. So that's if you lose the city and you're forced to fight in the field right there. All right, winning wise, pretty standard. If you win both sides, keep pushing. If you win the city, from the green side and you're pushing down onto the red, but they've won the field, go back. It's so easy that it's even on a slow tank. It's a small map. Just turn around, go back, wipe out their guys trying to push your cap. That's pretty standard. And while it's standard, not everybody does it. But on this map, it's super, super easy to do. So do it every time. Same thing with the red side. If you win, but the green guys are threatening your cap, just turn around and go clean up the cap. As a matter of fact, for the most part, you can defend your caps and shoot at the other guy's cap if there's a scrum going on there, depending on where you are. Especially if you're working in these tracks or maybe in this north area or south area of these buildings, you can actually fight the cap and the other guy's cap to a large extent. So it's a small map. You're able to do both of those. All right. Well, that's it for Ensk, man. It is one of the older maps. I think it's a pretty good map, pretty interesting map, but it is a phone booth fight. So unfortunately for scouts, it kind of sucks for them unless you can remove a bunch of guns and then your mobility comes into play. But as far as actual no kidding scouting and spotting damage and stuff like that, other than a little bit of early field kind of action, probably not really a player for the scout. But for heavies, this is a pretty good map because you're going to get into a pretty good brawl down here. Even if you're on encounter, you can get into a pretty good brawl in these buildings right here. So it's a pretty good heavy and medium map for brawling. TDs, sort of indifferent. Assault TDs are going to like it a lot more than the glass cannons. Glass cannons will find it hard to be effective on this because there's just not a lot of great standoff positions for the glass cannons. They're going to have to be more vultures and opportunistic kind of players with the glass cannons right there. All right, guys, that's all I've got for Ensk. I appreciate you all coming by. We'll see you later on another another map room later.